Hello, welcome to AT&T Threat Track for May 31st, 2016. This program provides network security highlights, discussion, and countermeasures for cyber threats. Today we're joined online by Jim Clausing. Hey Jim, how's it going?
Going well. Had a good holiday weekend.
Oh, right. Trying to stay cool over there?
Yeah, well, it is getting pretty warm out here.
Yeah. Okay. And thanks for being on the show with us again today. And also on the couch here we have Matt Kaiser. Hi Matt, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Good. And staring blankly off into space, we have Manny Ortiz. How's it going, Manny?
Not bad.
Good. Good to see you again. So let's jump into the first story. And I think this is one that you were looking at, Matt. Another nation-state actor kind of thing going on. It's called Stealth Falcon. What's the scoop on this one?
Yeah, so this is a write-up by Citizen Lab, who, in my opinion, does really good, really technical and complete write-ups. They're attributing this one with sort of circumstantial evidence to the government of the UAE. Whether or not that's true is not really the most important part for me. For me, it's the technical analysis they've done, which is outstanding.
Okay.
So what they've got is there's a campaign being waged against certain supporters of a certain political viewpoint, and the attackers have created fake Twitter pages, users, a fake NGO, non-governmental organization, and this is the one that really I think is kind of neat, is a fake URL shortener, which they've made public.
Oh, really?
So they created this URL
shortener.
Because apparently there's code out there you can create your own URL shortener, basically. You own the domain, you have the software running, and it just sets up short URLs as you give it to them. And one of the Twitter accounts is sending out these short URL links to targets, and the targets are clicking them. Now, the interesting thing is that the URLs that are created by the attackers look just the same to like short URLs as the ones that anybody else can create, but they behave slightly differently. If I were to create a short URL on this site, it would point me directly to that site. Bang, I'm there. With one of these, it loads a secondary page in the middle saying, you are being redirected to X page, please wait. And while it's waiting, it's doing fingerprinting on the site. It's using JavaScript and possibly some other technology, but it's taking a look and saying, what is your browser? Are you using the Tor browser? What antivirus are you using? Getting an idea of what's installed on that machine, which is invasive, but if you're trying to figure out that yes, the visitor is who they think they are, and sort of prep yourself for a future attack, be a great way to get information about their machine. So Citizen Lab did something that I've seen done with other URL shorteners, which is kind of cool, is they were given samples of the short URLs. And URL shorteners are usually short domains / a couple of letters. They figured out you could enumerate the possible short URLs that are possible for that space and just figured out which ones were active and figured out where they were pointing and the different types of themes that were related to the short URLs that existed. So they made a map and said, these are the ones, these are the topics, these are the probable targets, and then also mapped out, based on the Twitter users that they found, who were the actual targets and what were their interests. So there's a very, very comprehensive write-up of that. It's pretty good investigative work. So I would recommend anybody go see that. If you want to get really into tools, techniques, and procedures of an attacker group, this is a great write-up.
Yeah. The TTP angle there, I think, is an important part. So if I'm like a regular user and I happen to stumble across this URL shortener service, I could have registered my own.
Absolutely. And like I said before, if you're just a regular old user off the internet, your shortened URLs don't have that go-between with the fingerprint.
They're not weaponized, right?
Yeah. So that gives it, if anybody else was like, can you go investigate this? Be very hard-pressed to find evidence. Yeah.
Interesting. That's a very interesting technique. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that before, but I've seen the enumeration of URL shorteners in some analyses before, so that's interesting technique. And certainly this type of activity is not unusual by certain governments that want to keep track of human rights interests. We know that there's other countries that do this as well, so probably an interesting thing to take a look at from a TTP standpoint and understand that better, just so that you're aware as a defender, what to look for and recognize it when you see it. So the next story up is one that you were looking at, Jim, and it has to do with something that we see a lot of, Office documents with macros in them, but there's a little twist on this one, it sounds like.
Yeah, this was kind of interesting. It was a write-up last week from Bromium Labs that they had discovered some Office documents that in the VB script in their they checked to determine if they were running inside a VM or not. Now, we've seen malware in the past that is VM aware, that checks to see if it's running in a virtual machine, and if it is, then it doesn't do its malicious activity. But this one was odd in that I'd never seen that happen in a document, in macros in a document before. This was kind of interesting. They run a number of the standard checks, looking for strings related to virtual machine type architectures. They check to see what other processes are running on the system, and if you're running Process Explorer, Procmon, Snort, Wireshark, then they won't do their malicious activity, which is to go out and download their malicious payload, their secondary payload with their malware. Like I said, this is kind of strange. We've seen it before in malware, but I had never seen it before in Office documents. And we were talking before we went on the air about why they might be doing it, and I think I think it's possible one of the reasons they're doing it in the macros in the Office document is to get past folks who scan documents as they're coming into the infrastructure, to get past some of the preliminary antivirus scanning types of things that get done there. So yeah, it was interesting. The first time I had ever seen this. Apparently, the first time that the guys at Bromium Labs had seen it too. So I thought it was a really interesting new method by the bad guys.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, unless you've been living under a rock for the past few years, malicious Office documents is probably, if not the number one way, very close to the number one way that attackers are doing or even just regular phishing attacks. We see lots of large phishing campaigns that have Word documents with macros in them, and then when you open it, it says, hey, in order to see the content of this document, you need to enable macros. And they even sometimes give you a little arrow pointing, so if you're not aware of that and you're watching the show, please be aware of that now. Don't enable macros in documents, certainly ones that you receive from somebody randomly on the internet. Even when it is somebody that you trust, you might want to call them up and ask and make sure that they realize there's macros in this document and whether that was intentional or not. But good point in that I don't think I've seen this before either, where they've actually pushed the VMware detection up into the first layer here, really. This is what I would consider like stage 0, right? You get this malicious Word document, and usually all that does is it goes and executes, or it goes to fetch a piece of malware and drop it on the machine. So it's really a dropper kind of thing, usually that Word document with the macro in it. So now they're even shortcutting that, and I think you're probably right that they're trying to evade any of these email spam gateways that are maybe doing a little bit more rigorous analysis of the attachments that are in email. And if they don't see anything dropped, they might think it's okay and let it through to the actual user. But in reality, it would really do something on a real machine.
Yeah, so the way to get around this is read all of your email only on VMs.
Right. Or run a rogue process called Wireshark.exe on your machine that doesn't really, you could run a very lightweight, do-nothing process that does that kind of thing. And actually, I think we were talking before the show too, there was some version of ransomware, I can't remember if it was Locky or one of them, where they actually had an inoculation that did some similar technique where they tried to set things in the registry so that when the malware got there, it would think it was already on the system and it wouldn't run. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to set things up, and it's another tactic you can do. I actually wouldn't recommend that tactic. I don't think that's going to work as a long-term strategy, but it's an interesting kind of method that some people have tried to use. So, but really, I think, we know a lot of defenders use virtual machines of one form or the other as a means to analyze malicious documents, executables, and whatnot. most savvier analysis people have already figured out how to make it machine look like it's not a virtual machine, to get around all of these little tests. But some people are just doing it on a low budget, might not have done all that if they're doing a manual kind of setup on their own.
Yeah, well, and there are more sophisticated tests that they could have done, but a few years ago, I thought that the malware looking to see if it was running on a VM would actually stop. We wouldn't see as much of it because we're seeing more and more virtualized systems with cloud computing and with hosted virtual desktop and that kind of thing. I expected to see less of this. We haven't really seen as much of a decrease in the malware that looks for, to see whether it's running in a VM. I haven't seen the decrease that I expected to see. So I guess I was wrong in that one. Maybe we will see that decrease eventually, but I thought the malware authors were shooting themselves in the foot by continuing to do that with more and more computing being done in virtual environments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we'll see. You're right. I mean, there's a definite move to virtual desktops, even a lot of point-of-sale systems. We know there's a lot of point-of-sale malware that runs in virtual spaces a lot of times as well. So we'll see. I guess it depends on who your target audience is for your malware, right? If you know your audience well, then you might want to custom tailor it. And it looks like whoever's doing this maybe knows that this is a good tactic to take. So
I still like your recommendation, though. Just run a free copy of Wireshark on your machine and
all the time.
At all times?
Right, all times. At all times.
Process
right?
Monitor.
Right.
And Process Explorer,
That seems an easy way.
There's a lot of free tools you can just
free.
run in your automatic startup.
Yeah.
That just run in the background.
You might learn
prevent malware
something.
from. You might stop a few things, but that's not really gonna work very well. As much as we joke about it. All right. So next story is one that you're looking at, Manny, and I guess there's some 0 days for sale.
Yeah, like any other day that they're for sale, right? On the dark webs, as they say. But
that's where Matt likes to hang out.
That's where Matt hangs out. But this one has come to light because such a high price tag has been put on it, right? So this is this was found on a Russian language cybercrime forum, and it was put up for sale for $90,000. It's basically a Windows bug that is of the type LPE, which is the local privilege escalation. So
Okay.
It allows you to basically escalate your privileges.
So once you've got onto the machine as
Right.
like a regular
Yep.
user, you
Yep.
need usually a local privilege escalation to get up to admin
Exactly.
level.
So it's
Okay.
it's usually used as sort of in conjunction with other things.
Right.
So you get onto the box. Once you've used your initial vulnerability to get you on the box, a lot of times those types of that type of compromise gets you access to the currently logged on user. Then your next step is obviously to escalate, right? That gets you even further into the box. So obviously high value goes to these types of bugs. So this particular one that has this high price tag supposedly is valid on all versions of Windows.
Okay.
From 2000 all the way up to literally, it says here, the latest patch on Windows 10, which was interesting. Although it hasn't been completely and utterly verified yet, because I don't know who's got the money to go actually test one of these things out. But anyway, so basically the article goes through and it starts talking about the uses of LPEs and why this is so valuable, and basically the actual seller in this case, which he calls himself Buggy Corp, which I thought was kind of funny, and the article itself actually, I guess to prove out, he actually has a video there where he's showing the use of this bug to prove out one of the methods that it was used to prove out that he actually does have this code and it actually does work. So the video actually shows it on a machine running EMET, which is the Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit,
Right.
which is some sort of software framework that I guess is supposed to be used
Well, it's
for...
like an add-on for Windows. It's supposed to prevent malicious code from
Yeah,
executing.
it has a couple other features, and I can never remember what's in EMET and what's not, but things like, are DEP and ASLR standard now? or are they
Yeah,
part of
I
EMET?
don't remember, but I think that was
But there's
in there
another
at
one
one
too
point,
that's
yeah.
escaping me.
It's got a bunch of things that it does.
Right. So proving his vulnerability out on a machine that's actually running this is that it's just that next level up. Like, hey,
Right.
you
Even
know,
if
this
somebody's running EMET on their
Well,
machine, which is not standard, it's like an extra layer of security.
It's supposed
you
to
can
be, right,
bypass
yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So either he's got the bug, or he's got a really good video editor.
Exactly.
So I mean, that's the thing. Until someone has seen the code, this is
Right.
like, you know, it could be a show. It could be
Yeah.
some guy with some real good YouTube chops.
Yep. Yeah. So again, it hasn't been proved out yet. So no one knows exactly whether or not it's true or not. But he does have this video, and then it goes on to talk about the way that the forum itself, so this Russian forum, uses sort of I guess I would relate it to sort of an eBay reputation based.
Okay.
So it allows you to basically create a reputation
Okay.
that says, and they use an escrow service.
Okay.
So if
they-
you
they
were
act
the
as an
buyer,
escrow?
you would say, hey, look, I'm interested in buying it. I'll send the $90,000 to the escrow service. You send me the code. As soon as you say the code is good, I release the money. Obviously, I keep a little change for myself, and
The escrow
and then
service
right, the escrow
releases
service
it,
does,
yeah.
and then the person gets their money for the vulnerability. So so this particular user used this escrow service, which is another also what they're saying is proving that this may actually in fact be legitimate.
Add some legitimacy to
Yeah,
it. He's not just
exactly.
trying to
Yep.
say, hey, send me some money and through whatever PayPal or something. and I'll send it
Exactly.
to you.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
not trying to do a direct transaction.
Yeah, yeah.
I see.
So they also talk about that Microsoft. Obviously, I think we all know, and we probably talked about it. Microsoft has their own bug bounty program, and their bug bounty program. There was actually somebody from Microsoft that chimed in. And they had said, hey, yeah, we, usually these types of things we like to come through our bug bounty, and in particular, this kind of vulnerability presented to us would probably pay out somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000.
Jeez.
So, as the writer of the vulnerability, either going to sell it on the dark web or selling it directly to Microsoft, almost.
Unless he could sell it twice.
Exactly.
Well,
Three
yeah.
Three different people,
Yeah.
right? I don't know.
But wait, if he goes to Microsoft, he'll get a shirt too.
It's
You
very
gotta
tough to get
think
that
ahead.
shirt.
Yeah.
I
I'm
forgot
gonna go
to
to
show the
Cafe
old shirt
Press and
factor.
make my
The
own
shirt
Microsoft
factor.
shirt. Anyway.
Got it. And that was actually one of the key points, was that there is quite a bit of variation between like how much certain people would pay for it. So in the market, what is something like this actually worth?
Yeah, I haven't gone shopping for zero-day bugs
No,
lately, so
no.
I don't really know what the average price
Right.
is. Whether
Well-
it sounds like 90,000 from our discussion here might be a little on the high side.
Well, I mean, you got to factor in the fact
Possibly.
that it apparently works on all Windows versions. That is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Microsoft in their bug bounty program is willing to pay out $100K for a full bypass of EMET makes that pretty significant if in fact he really is able to bypass it.
Right. Well, interesting story. And for those unfamiliar with the underground marketplace and these kinds of things, probably something that a lot of people don't know about. I'm not well versed on it myself, but I know that these kinds of things are transacted on a regular basis, in the underground space. So interesting thing to keep an eye on. And we know there's a lot of nation states and other crimeware actors that they like to collect these things. Then when they have their new campaign, they can easily make that $90,000 back, especially a crimeware campaign, in pretty short order probably.
Yep.
So as long as they're very organized, and a lot of these groups are organized, if you know what I mean. So
We also learned that Matt hangs out in the dark webs a
yeah,
lot.
I was
So
just
I'm
goofing
surprised I don't know this already. I should be much more up on this.
around. You should.
Absolutely.
I just assume that you know everything that's going on the internet. You're my window into the darker side of the internet. With that, let's move on to the next story. Speaking of working in the dark shadows of the internet to exfiltrate data, it sounds like somebody has a new technique that hadn't been thought of before.
Well, yeah, this is maybe at least a really cool spin on an old technique. So this was a talk that was given at Hack in the Box Amsterdam. A company called SafeBreach, two of their researchers presented on, the title of the talk was something around perfect exfiltration of data. And whenever somebody says perfect in information security, my ears perk up and I go, this can't be right. But it's really cool. So they sort of posited the idea of, if you had to exfiltrate data in a system that was being completely observed, and it had to look normal, and it couldn't use any systems that were typical for like getting rid of, sharing out data like email or things like that, they very limited them. So they came up with like 10 commandments of how to do this right, and these are the rules they imposed on themselves and said, now what can we do with it? So things like complete visibility of the traffic. No, if there's SSL involved, then it's terminated at the edge, and whoever's the defender gets to see all of it. Time synchronization between the communicating parties, which turns out to be very important. And no direct communication, which means if A wants to talk to B, they have to talk through C, this third party, which gets rid of a lot of things that if you want to use like IP headers and stuff in there, you can't do it anymore because
you can't
won't
really
be
go
passing
modifying the traffic because a third party in between's got to deal with it.
Right.
If it's going to have some weirdness. Okay.
So they come up with some pretty cool ideas. I feel like they're a little more academic than most. For me, this would be, if you're serious about getting data out and it absolutely positively cannot be detected, and you're willing to wait forever, these are the kinds of attacks you want to use. But these are the sorts of things where a bit at a time is being transferred.
Okay.
These are like, when you talk about covert channels, like to me, this feels very academic, like stuff I learned in school, where it's like, it's totally possible to do this, and you're like, well, who's going to wait around for several months to get their PDF document out of the server?
Right.
But anyway, so they talked about using web counters. So like you go to a website and it ticks up and says you have had X visitors, and now you're there and it's X plus 1. If you establish a time, like a series of moments at which you're supposed to check. So A visits the website, and this again, take this website, this theoretical website, assume that nobody else is going to it. Or at least that page up at that website. One URL, right.
Right.
And A hits the page. All they do is they load the page. And then B at a specific time checks that same page and says, oh, okay, since the last time I visited, either the counter has gone up or it hasn't gone up. And one of those is 1 and one of those is 0. And that's your bit. And you do that over and over over.
8 attempts there will get you a byte.
Yes, or non-attempts. On schedule.
Right, yeah,
if nothing's happening,
you're still going to have to check, right?
Yes.
To get a 0 or a 1.
And you're going to have to account for the other guy checking it too. But still, yes, this is your slow way of getting it.
Slow.
Yeah, I mean, you can try and accelerate the schedule, but I think we talked before the show, like any sorts of repeated requests like this is going to start to look like beaconing. And if you're doing something behavioral, you'll probably start saying, why is this guy hitting this web page that has nothing but a counter on it? Or it could be anything, It could be some other arbitrary web page you've picked, but why do they keep requesting it? Yeah. So it starts to get more suspicious the more times you hit the page. Account login time is an interesting one. Like if you log into a service like Yahoo or Gmail, and it says the last time you logged in was 5 o'clock on Tuesday, and then you log out, and they check it and they say, has somebody checked in the last time period? Okay, it hasn't changed. That's a 1 or a 0. Same kind of idea. So we're building it one bit at a time. HTTP server caching was an interesting one to see if the page was cached or not. The one I thought was probably the least likely to get detected is online friend statuses. So if I'm logged into like Skype or Facebook chat, and Bob is online at time A, he's not online at time B. That's 2 more bits.
Right.
So that you can probably do, as long as that chat session is allowed. If you're not blocking Facebook. Then this could just be somebody with a flaky internet connection coming on and offline, but you're sending 1 bit at a time. So these are all, they're kind of cool. I don't know how practical they are.
Right. Yeah, the practicality of it seems a little weak, but I guess it would work. However, most security defenders like ourselves, if we're watching somebody or a machine, like we have algorithms that run and look, and if I see a machine that is beaconing to a single location very often, then that's going to actually raise an alarm in our systems. So they would have to do, like, if they're doing a byte a day, then maybe then I won't notice it. But if you do more than that,
But that's the thing. Like, I think that last one, those friend requests, is probably the least likely to get noticed by the defender, because if you've got a service and the way that it works is it has to call the server every so often.
right?
And anybody
so those
who's
would
done
be the
this-
only ones where you could really hide more easily, right?
But-
or a
yeah.
weather type thing. I think I was
Yep, you did say that.
proposing. You know, there's a lot of
ticker.
those weather things or stock ticker.
Should we be giving
maybe.
this away? Should we be giving away free advice like this?
Well, I don't know if it's free advice, but we're just kind of talking around the theoreticals of it.
Right.
You know, while we're talking about this topic, and we didn't cover these stories, but this type of covert channel stuff is actually coming into play more. So I know in the past few weeks, we've seen DNS used as a method of
Yeah,
exfiltration.
yeah.
So they'll make queries. And that's not completely new, but we're seeing nation-state actors and crimeware actors both use this technique where they're actually exfiltrating data 4 bytes at a time as part of the DNS query. So that's what the nation-state one. And then the crimeware one, I don't remember exactly how that one works. But they don't communicate directly to the machine at all. They talk to a DNS server, and that's their DNS server. You know, if I'm in a company, I'm going to talk to my DNS server, who's going to probably talk to some other DNS server, who's going to ultimately talk to the real DNS server and get some TXT record back or something. So there's a very discrete way of doing it, not invisible. You could definitely, if you know what you're looking for, it's very easy to find that activity. But unless you've been looking at DNS activity as part of your security analysis, you might not pick it up. So I think that's an important thing to let people know about as well, that it's not always the methods you expect, especially if it's an advanced actor. They might try to find very clever ways to get data out. And I think some of these ones, at least I get 4 bytes at a time with the DNS one. And they have some tools that, will do it, but still that will create a lot of chatter, right? If I want to transfer a 400 byte message, that's 100 DNS requests that I got to do really quickly. Right. So that's going to hopefully trigger some kind of awareness in a security apparatus. Yep. So anyway, interesting story. I think these are all, like this one's, a lot of these are theoretical. Some of the ones I mentioned are actually in use, but they're used in very discrete segments. It's not like a mass type of malware infection. So I don't know that a lot of people have seen them yet, but it's something to keep an eye on. If you just Google around, I think you'll probably find some of the recent stories about that. Some of I don't remember exactly who put out each of those articles, but anyway. So, internet weather. We actually have something very interesting that happened in internet weather. We have reached an unprecedented level. I don't think I've ever seen it this high, ever in my career here, of scanning activity on 23TCP. And when I talk about ever, I'm talking about in terms of scanning on a single source before. So we went from we've been talking about 23TCP as a scan source for years now. And I'm actually going to show you a 2-year chart. What's that?
Scan source?
Well, I mean scan sources, whatever.
Right.
But as a port that they're scanning on. So we've gone from kind of a normal average baseline of, let's just kind of rough eyeball it at like 60 to 80, maybe 70,000 scan SIPs per hour, up to 260,000. And this just really happened over the past weekend, really. So somebody over Memorial Day weekend here built out their botnet quite a bit. And this is more dramatic when we go to the 2-year chart. So this is a 30-day chart of this. When you look at the number of scan flows, you can see this actually kind of jumped up by about 5 to 6 times of the normal amount. So if we jump to the 2-year chart here, so this is the 2-year chart of activity. So we're going to expand, look at it in a longer term time span. We've been looking at this activity for a very long time, and you can see I put red bars up here so that you could see all of this activity over the past 2 years. But because it's kind of hard now that it's just a small sliver up here once we squeeze it all together. But we've really gone from something that even back here in the 2014 timeframe, this was probably still the #1 scan source on the internet. Like in terms of the most scanned port, this was it in terms of number of sources, the amount of activity. And now we've reached a really unprecedented level. So it'd be very interesting to see if this continues. I hope it doesn't. This was pretty significant. I don't even know if I could explain how significant this amount of activity is. It's a lot. This is a lot of scanning activity, especially when you're looking at the 5 to 6 times as many scan probes on the port that was already the number one scanned port. It was probably taking up like 30 to 40% of those pie charts ones that we would do.
Some days we saw like 47, 50% even.
Yeah. This is really significant. So definitely one we're going to want to keep an eye on throughout the week here, and we'll give you an update next week. But it's quite a bit. So one of the other ones we've been talking about a lot lately is the 53413 UDP Netis router, which we see a lot of activity on. And I think Brian had mentioned this last week, that we're still seeing a decent volume of scan sources, even last week, over the last few months, but they haven't really been very active. You just kind of see this scraggly looking amount of scanning activity down at the bottom. So the top chart is the number of sources scanning. And then the bottom one is how much scan probe activity they're generating, those sources. So you can see that we have a lot of sources here, but they're not really doing as much scanning activity as they had been when you look back here before, where it was pretty much the amount of scan sources kind of trended about the same as the scan probe activity. It kind of had the same profile, whereas it kind of changed shape here a little bit for a month or so, maybe a month and a half. And within the past few weeks, we have noticed a pretty swift upturn in the amount of activity here. So in terms of the actual scan probes, you can see that this arrow is trending very steeply up, where the amount of scan sources is not really trending up as much. So we have kind of the same number of scan sources, maybe a few more than we used to, a few thousand more. But they're being more aggressive than they had been. So somebody's giving them instructions to do a lot more than they had been. We know this is botnet related activity. This is one of those ones that it's very trivial. You just send a UDP packet out to the internet with a message in it that says, go download this file and execute it. And if the machine's a Netis router, or the appliance is a Netis router, receives it, and he's got this vulnerability, he'll say, okay, and he'll go do it. And now he's a member of your botnet. So it looks like somebody's trying to build that out a little bit more. And maybe they had a period of time here over the past couple of months where they weren't really utilizing it very well, or giving it instructions to do additional scanning. So the 4028 TCP is another one we've talked about. DT server, and I forget what the DT, it's not DHT, it's something else, but it's not really what the official name is for it here. We've talked about this before. I've never really dug into it completely. Probably still need to do that. It's just a matter of getting the time to go really analyze these. We have looked at some of these devices engaged in the scanning, a lot of home routers, a lot of these embedded Linux devices, network attached storage devices, and the patterns definitely, this kind of sawtooth decay is classic botnet looking activity. If you see that, then you know there's probably a botnet in play where they've issued instruction to all the bots to start scanning. The fast ones finish quicker, the slower ones finish slower, and you kind of get that decay like that. But it's still in play. My best guess, I did a little research into the Hydra malware family, and back in 2014 when this was getting installed a lot more, and still is today, they would, as part of its installation, it would open a backdoor, remote command shell on port 4028 that people get hit. So it's very plausible that that's what somebody's looking for. Maybe somebody's looking for any of these ones that have already been owned by somebody else, trying to take them over for themselves. I don't know. I'm theorizing here, but it's a plausible theory. But I haven't really actually ever observed that myself on any of these compromised devices. So anyway, it's an interesting one to keep an eye out. It would be nice to get a better understanding around exactly what's happening there. And then this is kind of showing the distribution. I didn't actually tally up exactly who's involved here, but Brazil for sure. Well, South America in general seems to have a lot more of these devices. The US is very light. There's not that many scan sources involved from the US. I forget where this is. Anybody remember what?
Where
country this is here.
I can't really see. Maybe
Somewhere
the
in
Philippines?
the Asia Pac South Pacific region, it looks like.
Indonesia.
Is it Indonesia? That's possible. Thanks, Jim. And then somewhere in the Middle East here has a big chunk of them, and I want to almost say it's Iran, but I'm not positive because I think we had looked at this once before, and I think Iran popped up. And then there's a bunch in Europe here scattered throughout. So when I had done some analysis before, there definitely were segments of embedded devices that families, vendors that were showing up more than others. And it's possible that whoever's doing this is looking for certain vendors of devices and compromising those more than other ones. So it's interesting that there aren't that many in the US involved in this activity. Another one that we hadn't talked about, but we've seen some recent activity scanning on it in the past week or so here, is Postgres. So Postgres is a database. It's really popular. It's not as popular as some people think of as MySQL and MS SQL and Oracle. But Postgres is another very popular database engine that's available on most Linux platforms. And somebody has been aggressively scanning for it. And it is really somebody. So it is a single scan source that is very aggressively scanning for servers that are running Postgres. And that's the common port, that the default one, 5432 TCP, that Postgres listens on. And it's also coming from a US web hosting provider that has a notably bad reputation. I'm not going to mention who they are. However, most of us that work in security are familiar with the bad reputation of this ISP. So that's not surprising. It's probably an owned box or somebody's using it to do this scanning activity. So something to keep in mind, if you have Postgres and it's exposed to the internet, first of all, I'd say, why are you doing that? And I would say definitely try to minimize who can talk to that to only the people that should. So then the last chart I have here for the internet weather is Zero Access Botnet. So last week, Jim went over some of the recent malware trends, I want to say, was it like for first quarter of 2016 or
It
something?
was for the month of April. It was at a checkpoint from the month of April.
Right. And I think they had observed that Zero Access was still in the top 3 there, which I was kind of surprised about. But maybe I don't know as much as I know about Zero Access anymore. But I pulled the chart for what we see. And this is a 5-year chart, so it's a pretty long one. It shows you that from inception back in the 2012 timeframe here, all the way to the death or the very rapid decline to minimal amounts that we see today. Now this is based on Zero Access is a click fraud and Bitcoin mining piece of malware. It uses peer-to-peer for its communication control. That peer-to-peer is on these 4 UDP ports, which is what these 4 rivers of color look like here. For those 4 ports. And what they do is they just beacon out to the internet trying to say, hey, is anybody out there that's also one of these Zero Access bots? And if he finds somebody that is, they start talking to each other and exchange information. Back in the 2012 timeframe, some of the industry analysts were estimating there's about 2.2 million of these out there. In our charts here, our peak is about 50,000 unique scan sips per hour. Of course, we don't have a complete visibility of the internet. We also do our aggregation based on hour as opposed to a day, because it gives you a little bit more fine granularity when you do it by hour. So in reality, it probably is many, like what we probably saw at AT&T's internet backbone space is probably in the hundreds of thousands or more per hour, per day when you actually aggregate the unique SIPs. But I can only give you the per hour. So our peak was about 50,000. That's the top of this yellow line. Back in the 2013 timeframe. But now, and it's barely even registerable on this chart here, it's about 500 unique SIPs per hour, which is pretty low. Mm-hmm. So it's very possible. I marked on here that in December 2013, Microsoft did do a takedown effort, which was a little, there was some skepticism on how successful that was because they didn't get all the command and control servers, plus the peer-to-peer aspects of it let the bots that were already infected and not getting AV updates continue to exist. However, I would argue that at least for these variants that use this peer-to-peer protocol, it seems that over time here, it was fairly successful in lowering this down quite a bit. Now, if zero access has changed, which I'm not aware of, and they're using some different means for command and control, which is possible, and that's why that other article had mentioned them still being quite a few out there, that would be interesting to know. I'd like to see if I could get an updated chart to that regard. But I thought it was interesting to take a look anyway to see how it's been doing, because we had been looking at this over the past many years, especially back when it was in its heyday here, back in the 2013 timeframe. We were keeping a close eye on it. So, and even back when it was in its heyday doing click fraud, I think they're estimating that, this is an estimate, that the amount of revenue it was generating, this botnet, from click fraud operations was about $100,000 a day, which is quite a bit. So if I'm running a criminal enterprise here with these bots, and I'm able to defraud, a lot of these advertisement things that are paying me to get clicks on their pages, they were estimating about 100,000. Now, whether that was a real number, I don't know, but that's some of the reports I was reading when I was kind of researching this again this morning. So anyway, I thought it was interesting too. So that's the show for today. Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at attthreattrack@list.att.com. You can also find AT&T Threat Track on the AT&T Tech channel, YouTube, and iTunes. Please follow us on Twitter. Our handle has changed recently. We're now at ATT Business on Twitter, so you can follow us there. Actually, all of the AT&T stuff, I think, is going out through, well, not all of it, but at least for the business and security offering stuff that we talk about is through that Twitter handle. So update your bookmarks and make sure you follow us over there. I'd like to thank you, Matt. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Manny. I'm John Hogaboom. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Until then, keep your network safe.